Welcome to the Wolfkeeper, a show that's just about everything that you can maybe think about, everything that you can feel that's inside of your heart. What I need for you to do right now is spend the next hour relaxing. Just stop your day before you go into 12 o'clock. And I just want y'all to close your minds, open your hearts, and relax and go on this journey with me. It's a beautiful place that you're about to go, because I want to make you feel, I want to just open you up and think about some things you never really thought about. Right now, the Wolfkeeper. Come on. Good morning, y'all. Come on. It's the Wolfkeeper show. Get ready. Come on, let's go. Yeah. Woo. Yeah. It's the Wolfkeeper show. Your boy Toriano Sanzoni. Yeah. Chanelli Nell. My boy Tyrone Scott somewhere rocking the Doogie Dogs. Denzel's in his house. Shacky Shack. And for all the people out there that love us, we love you back. Thank you all. Get ready for an amazing show with the Wolfkeeper. Get ready. Here we go.
Toriano Sanzoni, the Wolfkeeper, and today I am live with Dr. Lisa Heldke. How are you feel?
I'm doing well, Toriano. Great to see you. Really great to see you.
Great to see you. It's let's just jump right into it because it's kind of bittersweet because I was supposed to be sitting across from you in St. Peter, Minnesota today. I was going to leave. Actually, my goal was to leave at like 1 a.m., drive through the night, be there, shower, chill, relax, meet up with you somewhere, do this live, and then bounce around campus. My son is attending school there, but just keeping it real, I didn't feel safe driving through Wisconsin late during the night, which it's just crazy that that's a real thing, like just what we're talking about today. And I don't know if you got a chance to see my description, but let me see if I can read it because I thought I was so clever. I said, oh no, it got erased. But I said something like, today's discussion is racism in America and what would Frederick Douglass do? I mean,
exactly.
So I mean, that's a real thing. I mean, Sunday, a black man gets shot 7 times in the back in Kenosha, Wisconsin, of all places.
Exactly.
Then on Monday, a kid from Antioch, Illinois, drives across straight line with an AR-15, shoots 2 people in the head, 2 white Americans in the head, injures 1, jumps back in his car, goes back to Antioch, Illinois. Next day, a black male in Minneapolis shoots himself in the head in Nicollet Mall. Complete riots break out. They burn Brit's Pub of all. That kind of
Exactly.
Been there many times. I mean, Haskell's was completely ransacked. And then now we got Thursday, Friday, Kenosha and everything else is like completely on fire and everything else. It's like, what's your thoughts on all that?
And as you say, you as an African American man have to make decisions like, is it okay for me to drive across Wisconsin in the middle of the night? What if my car breaks down? What if I run out of gas? What if I just need to stop for gas at a gas station and someone decides that, my hair is wrong or I look at them wrong? I mean, this is, it's completely horrifying and sobering. And I know that it is really nothing new, right? That right now white people are noticing this in ways that many of us haven't before. But what we're experiencing is something that for African Americans and particularly African American men has been part of the fabric of your life since you were brought here, right?
Right.
So it's completely disheartening. And I guess the only hope that I keep, if hope is the right word, the only thing that I keep thinking about is it does feel to me like some Euro-Americans, some white folks are, for whatever combination of reasons, noticing and saying, yeah, it is our problem to address directly. I mean, that's the most encouragement I can see in all of this. Is it feels to me, and I've heard others, report this, others who were, present in the civil rights movement of the 60s, that they're seeing greater numbers of white folks saying, yeah, we got to get involved. Because let's face it, I mean, the person on Facebook who said, we're not going to resolve this until white people stop thinking it's something to feel sympathy for African Americans about, and white people start saying, no, this is our shit to fix. And I don't mean alone or, single-handedly or anything like that, but this is ours. This is, white racism is white racism, right? Anti-black racism is a product of white supremacy. So that's, that was a long rant maybe, but that's what I'm thinking right now is, how do whites take increasing accountability for what's going on?
But I mean, hasn't that always been an issue of, throughout history, there were white Americans that were like, hey, I want to make things better. I think,
sure.
But
John Brown.
Right. There were abolitionists, but if you live in certain parts of this country, obviously it's really not, you can be certain parts of this country and be totally oblivious to racism and what's going on. Do you see it potentially being something like, for lack of a better example, like in East Africa, Kenya, where, you have, people that have wealth and money and you have people that are poverty? Can the lines separate just that further again? Where you truly have just like, hey, I'm living over here in my temple. I have a doorman. I have security. You can't come in this area. It's not safe to drive around wherever, whether it's Edina, whether it's Minnetonka, whether it's, Winnetka, whether it's Bel Air, because obviously we know there's certain areas that if you drive around, you will be stopped. So we, as Black Americans, have made those kind of rules, but can you see that just widening, and just, is it really something that can ever be fixed? Is it just, a reality that we just need to accept?
Right. Well, you're asking the perennial question, right? If one form of oppression will just be replaced by another, and I think, as a 60-year-old as opposed to a 30-year-old, I guess I feel like it's the case that I don't believe we ever fix things entirely, but I think we, I'm a Jane Addams meliorist, right? Like I'm always think Jane Addams, icon of Chicago, west side of Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Founded the settlement movement, and Jane Addams would say, look, we have to fix things one garbage collector at a time, right? We have to believe that we can make incremental change. And I guess that's what I mean is, I'm at the point in life where I think, man, incremental change can be really freaking amazing, right? It's really way more, it's really powerful, and sometimes incremental change turns into transformative change, right? Sometimes it doesn't, usually it doesn't, but wow, if we don't go for it, if we don't believe that we can move the needle on things like this, well then, what do we do? I mean, what do we do? I'm compelled by people who say, you have no right not to be hopeful, right? Like I'm really compelled by that way of thinking. The folks who say, it's not okay with me that you roll over and play dead, especially you, white person with enormous privilege, right? Like I've got educational privilege. I've got this privilege of having a safe place to live. I've got the privilege of work that is meaningful. I've got the privilege of a great dog. I have all these forms of privilege.
Right.
And I'm going to say, oh, it's wrecked. There's nothing we can do. I don't think so. I don't think I get to say that. If I have this much safety and security, then I jolly well better be saying, I better be using it in much more active ways. And frankly, I have been, right? As a white person with privilege, I need to be saying, yeah, this is super broken, and I got to use my power and privilege to start putting up plywood for starters. So that was a long rant. I don't think you've ever let me talk that long before, Toriano.
I just love hearing. I'm stuck. You had me stuck when you mentioned Jane Addams, because here's a person fighting, for people of the West Side of Chicago, and this is less than 2 years ago, where there was a huge fight that went on about the naming of this library, in the area that I live in called Little Italy, where one side of Little Italy, which is predominantly black, wanted this library to be called the James Adams Library, and the other side wanted to be called the Little Italy Library. And this went on. They were fighting. I'd walk into these meetings and hear all the Italians sitting on one side, or the people, white Americans on one side, and then the blacks were sitting on the other. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go. Well, I know these guys are going to go sit with the Italians, because I know a lot of them, and they're sitting there. I'm like,
wow.
What's up? And they're just like, tell her to shut the fuck up. I'm like, whoa, like that's the PG version. I won't even say the rated R version, what was really said when I walked. They're just
yeah.
And I was just like, let's just call it, keep the same name. It's called the Roosevelt Library, because they was renaming a library that was, why rename a library that already exists? It's a brand new building, but keep the old name. Name it after a dead president. I don't even know if that's right, but that's what it's been for the last however many years. Anyway, it ended up becoming a Little Italy Library. But I've just been reflecting of all the just different things in just the last year that I've noticed of just racism. We can go on and on and on with stories, but just my own personal story. I thought about it, with George Floyd. I'm rocking my George Floyd T-shirt.
It's beautiful.
By
It's
an
beautiful.
artist named Chadwick. Peace out to Chadwick out in Cali, who made that. But I had to think for myself. I said, how many times have I been stopped or encountered with the police officers? I said, since leaving Minnesota, not even including Minnesota, but from 2000 to 2020, I would say at least 75 times.
Oh my God.
For sure. 100%. And this is me, college educated, which I would say educational privilege, travel privilege, economically privileged, everything but this brown skin,
race,
this hair.
Which makes everything, right? Which changes everything.
But I would just think about at least 75 times for sure. I could give 75, and I have it, because then I was like, oh, I said, dude, you don't even have to count. I have a journal. I got a whole journal. But I'm just wondering, Lisa, like, and just kind of going back to that question I asked you before, Because it's kind of like this weird, like, bad relationship. You know what I mean? Like, it's like a bad girlfriend or a bad boyfriend. Like, we know it's bad, but we still love them. It's just we accept it's how they're going to be because what's the other alternative? Where do we go? Like, is there someone else that can, is there a better relationship? Because it's like, I'm 46, right? Will there ever be a time where there will not be, you know, a black man being shot in the back, choked out, suffocated, you know, wrongly accused? Is that, should we just accept that? No, should we just say like, hey, that's a reality because it is a reality? You know what I mean? If it happens, you get this because there's a great chance. Should we just do like, have some type of, you know, statistician figure out what's the numbers of like, and just go ahead and you get your booby prize if it does happen to you, because the chances that it's not going to happen are so low. So let's already have, you know, healthcare in place, like mental health care in place, that you as a black person living in America are going to have a higher heart attack rate because you're stressed out more. I mean, they've done stats on that, you know. Like, I just think that we're not realistic about that, you know, because I was thinking about my great grandma. Yeah.
Before you go on, can I just tell you that your question breaks my heart? And it breaks my heart because I fear that the answer I should give you is, yeah, Toriano, in your lifetime, it's not going to stop being the case. And I think, how can I, as, again, a privileged white person, sit here and say to you, yeah, I don't think it's realistic for you to expect that anti-black racism won't reduce to the point where you don't fear of stop by the cops in your lifetime. Why am I not stopping everything else in my life to be joining with other white people to say, we have to stop business as usual in more ways than we already have, because this is craziness that this, you know, business owner, this upstanding, okay, maybe you've done a few things in your life, but this pillar of his community is saying to me, do you think it's ever realistic that I can, you know, not get stopped by the cops 75 times, that I can, if I get stopped by the cops, think, oh, I've got a taillight out, I'll get that fixed tomorrow, and not think, gee, I wonder if he's going to handcuff me and throw me on the ground. I've been stopped by the cops in my life 3 times, I think, Tori. Every single one of them for speeding, every single one of them for genuinely speeding, and in at least one case, I lipped off to the officer like, oh, I don't think I was going that fast. And he's like, well, I've got you on radar, lady. Right? Like, I didn't worry about being a little snot. Now, I know that, you know, women and police also have our own baggage, but my point is, I don't worry. Right, especially as a 60-year-old woman, I don't worry if the cops stop me. And so
you don't think you're going to get killed?
What the hell? Right. I don't think I'm going to get killed. No, and I don't think, frankly, now that I'm a target for the kind of sexual assault that I know is a real thing for women in, you know, in interactions with, you know, with figures of authority. So I guess just to bring that to a full stop, it breaks my heart that that's your question and that my answer is this kind of matter of fact, yeah, we're not going to accomplish it. And then I think, well, God damn it. What are the pieces that we are not yet doing? What are the pieces that we white folks are not yet doing? What do I need to do this fall? I'm teaching just one class because I'm doing this stuff for the Nobel Conference, which I know you know about. And we're focusing a lot in the Nobel Conference on the ways in which systemic racism means that people of color are at a greater risk of dying for cancer. You know, in my environmental philosophy class, we're looking at environmental racism. We're looking at why is it that we, you know, let's look at colonialism and the way in which colonialism meant the start of climate change. And what did colonialism do? It eliminated indigenous people from this continent in large measure. So, I mean, I'm just pointing to those things because I'm saying I'm looking at these little incremental things that I can do in my own life. But your question brings me to my knees and makes me say, what the hell? How can, you know, a man I love, I remember you from when you were 19 years old, 18, 19 years old, and you're asking me this question, and, you know, how many years have passed? Almost 30. And you're asking me that question. You
No,
shouldn't be asking me that question. You shouldn't have to ask me that question, Toriano.
Right.
I'm sorry. That's a really inadequate answer to your question. And I'm sorry isn't like, I'm sorry for racism. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it breaks my heart because just when you said that we've been knowing each other for 30 years, because here we are proof that it's not, and I love when people say that it's true because it's not everyone. Like I've been knowing, I call you up since 1992. Here we are, 2020.
Yep.
You know what I mean? We've traveled together. We've hung out together, you know, and
Yep.
And I love talking to you and what I wanted to share with the world today because, I mean, being this great philosopher, being my, philosopher, mentor, just, I was just thinking about, like, we were in class right now, like, what would they say 20 years from now? I mean,
right. Well, we have moved the needle.
Well, we have moved the needle, and I guess in some ways people say, well, we totally did. You know what I mean? Look, you got a chance to go to this historically white college when there were people that couldn't go to education at all. People couldn't vote. Obviously we know that there were certain things that, but then I'm like, but did we really? Like, I didn't want to drive through Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, exactly.
Like, I don't want to, I didn't feel compelled to jump in my car to drive through Wisconsin, drive through Minnesota. The last time I was in Minnesota, July 3rd, from being there for 10 years, I mean, I don't know, and I'm not going to say, oh, it's just me in my mind. It felt so heavy and dark there. It felt so heavy and dark, just boom. So what happened last week with a guy walking down Nicollet Mall, which is probably one of the most beautiful, promenades in the country, just beautiful, beautiful shops, high-end shops, stores that are very unique to the country. Like the Aveda was founded in Minnesota. You have one of the last standing Neiman Marcus's. You have some of the Brits pub, this historic pub that everyone. But a guy goes in the middle, a black man goes in the middle of the street and shoots himself in the head, and then it re-erupts all these violence, which is, we know that the mental illness that's happening right now, the PTSD that's happening right now,
why do we have a phrase, suicide by cop, right? Why is that a choice that African-American men find themselves making? Right. That's another piece of systemic racism, right? And I think, like, white people want to let ourselves off the hook there, right? Like, I know that his death got sort of overshadowed by the property destruction that followed, blah, blah, blah. And what I want to say is, why is it that African-American men feel like a better choice is to kill themselves than any of the other options that are open to them at that point? I mean, that in and of itself is a tragic feature of systemic racism.
Right. But
I interrupted you, sorry.
But I'm saying, but is that, I mean, I know I keep asking the same question, but I guess I know the answer. I just don't think, I don't say this in a pessimistic way, in a non-hopeful way. I think that it's a real relationship that we have to accept. You know what I mean? And then,
say that again.
It's a real relationship we have to accept. It's not going anywhere. It's kind of like, I was just thinking about, like, AIDS in the 80s, when it was, as long as you're not from San Francisco and you're not a white male, you're good, for sure. Then it was like, as long as you're not from San Francisco, white male, and you're gay, you're good. As long as you're not from San Francisco, white male, and IV drug user. I mean, it was a while before it was like, anyone can get AIDS. Stop saying San Francisco only.
Right.
We now know anyone can get AIDS. We now know, yes, you should use a condom because AIDS is a real thing. So we learned to live with this virus. So I'm like, how do you feel about the concept of, like, there's this conceptual virus called, racism? I mean, it's a real virus. You mean, and we've all been infected with it, and versus trying to, fight against it, let's just embrace the fact that, yes, at one point in time, this person owned this person. And then like my great grandmother, Queen Clarice Reed, who was born May 28, 1919. I mean, she was first generation free. Like, just think about that.
Yep.
A person that was first generation free raised me.
Yep.
I mean, so she had stories. So she lived through the end of slavery, because that's the thing. I think people forget that it wasn't like, oh yeah, you're all free, go kick it, do your thing. Like whatever the after effects in 1919 was that she grew up in.
Right.
Then Jim Crow after that.
Jim Crow.
Sharecropping, you know, separate but equal, just good old fashioned racism. I mean, that just brings you all the way up into like right now. Like were we ever really free?
No.
You know what I mean?
No. Yes, exactly. And no is the answer.
Like what is
the answer?
What is free when you think about it? You know?
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that we don't want to admit to. But can we, you know what I mean? Can we just like that? I think it's, I mean, like, and just like you as an educator, and I know you had the slavery classes, which I love, but could we go deep? Is that too much for someone to stomach if you really broke down the slavery and you saw more classes on the brutality and the history
it's a good question.
of slavery? Is that, I mean, I'm asking from like an educator stance. Is there a filter?
It's a good question.
Where it's too much, or can you actually construct some classes that are really talking about the brutality of slavery and how slavery really worked?
That's a great question, and I remember you were probably taking my American philosophy history class when we were reading. When we did a whole really long unit on slavery and responses to it, and it included, you know, a white guy who was a president of a university who was advocating slavery because, you know, really people of African descent weren't capable of freedom and so on. And then other white and black abolitionists who were writing in a lot of detail about that brutality. And I can remember sort of saying to you students, like, look, you got to be, you know, now we'd call it a trigger warning, right? Like, you got to be prepared because you're going to be reading descriptions of what happens to people's bodies. And I mean, I think people are all over the map about this. I think I, as an educator, think I want to keep people listening. So how do I do that? And I, you know, our pal John Dewey would say, you know, start where people are. So maybe as I think about, you know, a classroom with lots of students like I was, right? I grew up in northern Wisconsin, pretty sheltered. I thought I was really anti-racist, but I, you know, frankly had never met a black person until I came to college. But I was sure I wasn't a racist, you know, like maybe I needed some kind of gentle on-ramp that I didn't need to be yelled at or something. Maybe I did need to be yelled at. I think it's a really hard question. Like what's the most, so for me, it's partly about like, what should people need to be able to deal with? But then there's the question of what can I make sure they're going to continue to listen about, right? And I think maybe what your question is also asking is a question that links sort of our attention to systemic racism and our attention to, you know, kind of everyday racism that individual people practice, right? And I think one of the things that's hardest for me right now is, with our political climate, is seeing the ways in which folks who have always, frankly, been deeply and ordinarily racist, right? In the kind of using words and behaving in ways like you have talked about yourself experiencing recently, right? Like there was a way in which maybe for a time, and maybe especially when we had an African-American president, or maybe that was when it all started to go south. But there was a time in which people were a little bit more reluctant to say these things out loud. That time feels to me like it's over. It feels to me, and it seems like the statistics support it, that like people are willing to say more and more outrageous things. So, you know, as educators, what do we do in the classroom, right? Like, do we, you know, make space for that so that then we have the, you know, truly honest conversations? I think it's a really hard question. I know as a person who really is uncomfortable with conflict, that I struggle around that question, right? Like, am I willing to have the fight erupt in my class? Would the fight erupt in a class where most of the students are white? I mean, like, would there be a robust conversation among white students who stand in different places with respect to racism. I'd love to believe that there would be. I guess maybe I'm talking myself into a job here, right? Like maybe my job, maybe the job of us as educators in those places is to figure out ways to help students genuinely talk to each other and keep listening to each other, right? Like that's, what does it look like to listen long enough that you go, oh, like, right, like I want to report to you that right now, as much as I've thought about racism, and I'd like to think I've thought about it a lot, but listening to you saying, asking me that question about, in my lifetime, I feel like I heard it in a new and different way. I feel like when I'm listening well, I keep hearing African American people saying things to me that I need to keep hearing and hearing better. Like you saying,
Right.
is this forever? Suddenly that became one notch more real for me in a way. So partly maybe what I'm saying is for white people, we need to keep listening and reading and watching, right? We need to just keep hearing it and hearing it and hearing it until the place where we're like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Right? Because still there are too many of those moments where we white people are like slack-jawed saying, really, that happened to you? And you're like, yes, 75 freaking times it happened to me. Yeah. And stop being amazed because I'm not unique.
Stop being right. No, and I always jokingly say, and I'm the good Negro. Like
exactly.
For the person that legitimately might have something going on, but maybe not that day, But,
right. Or God forbid you did have a taillight out, right?
Right. Or God forbid I did have a prior record. So when you ran my license.
Or God forbid you had 3 ounces of marijuana in your car.
Right. So it can, let me ask you, this is not really an ask, but this is more like a request that I would like to see. Because a powerful thing that happened to me while I Gustavus, and I don't remember what class it was, and I don't remember the professor, but I just remember it being one of many of the most intense things I experienced, where we had to watch this documentary. This guy had filmed himself deteriorating from AIDS.
Oh, Marlon Riggs.
And then
I bet it was Marlon Riggs.
Okay.
Was he a filmmaker?
And I just remember going to class. It was just like,
I lost your sound.
It was super duper heavy. I mean, it was like over the top. Like every, one, it was heavy to watch. 2, it was gross to watch. Like it was some real shit. It was nothing warm and fuzzy about this at all. And then we talk about it. I'm just like, ooh, like. What do you say? We just really watched this man go from here to here and then die. Can we enforce that everyone watched the George Floyd video on the college campus?
So I want to ask you in return about that. Like I have been really compelled by colleagues and friends, African-American colleagues and friends saying, stop with the showing it over and over and over again. I will tell you, Toriano, I have not watched it. Do you think that's okay? That I've made that choice not to watch it. Do you think that's a good choice or a bad choice on my part?
I think that,
be honest.
I say no, I think you have to watch it. The same way, and I'm gonna say Gustavus again, one of the second things that Gustavus, my education, because I'm educationally privileged. That's because, my whole team of people, shout out to my mom and my aunts and my grandmother, everyone that broke their back to put me through that school, you who helped me stay in that school. But when I was in East Africa, Kenya, was the first time I saw someone decapitated, and that was no fucking joke. When I remember being at a stoplight and I'm like, I'm in a taxi, I'm like, look to my right, and there's this guy being decapitated. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. And I remember the driver just kind of goes like, Moisey. I'm like, Moisey, what is Moisey? I later found out Moisey is thief. Like, but when you actually see it up close, you're not the same. But you don't steal stuff over there. You don't touch stuff that's not yours. Because I was wondering, like, how do they have everything out in the street and no one takes anything? I found out why. Because they watch everything. It's like you could, like, they'll see you. You know what I mean? So that had an impact. I mean, certain things, I feel like that's why I'm a great human, thanks to education. Just certain things I don't do because I've seen certain things happen in my travels around the world, whether in Berlin, whether in Kenya, whether it's in Spain, whether it's in California. I've traveled enough where I've seen, like, as a good traveler and as a good citizen of the world, I don't do it because it's not going to look right. But it's a harsh reality. It's kind of like when George Floyd happened. If I was in charge of the country or any city, state, if I was a president, governor, or mayor, it'd have been martial law back in March for sure across the country on May 25th. Like, lock everything down. That seems a little extreme. You'll thank me later. I mean, just because I see how social unrest can go wrong in other countries really fast. And I'm not saying like I'm this travel guru, but I mean, on one level, I feel like we're Americans and we're being babies because other countries deal with this type of stuff every day. I mean, what? A protest? What? You can't go to the airport because they're protesting? What? A police state? That's been that way for like the last 50 years. What? Militarized zones? Wealthy and poor? I think like, yeah, because then when you see it, because like, we see it every day. I mean, I can go grab 10 kids from the west side of Chicago and they'll tell you like, oh yeah, I remember when Pooh Bear was shot by a cop last week. And I don't remember this guy was shot by, I mean, they see it all the time. So it's like they live in the pandemic. This is not the end of the world for a lot of Black Americans. But for a lot of people I get, they're seeing it for the first time and they still haven't really seen it. But I think when you act, and that's, thanks to good old technology, that when you see it, you're like, there's no way, me as someone that's in power, can let this happen. Because at the end of the day, Black Americans and a lot of, people of color don't have that power, that infinity snap. But if the owner of Apple says, you know what, I'm about to go put $2 billion to take out the North Lawn deal and make it look like a space age Jetson because I saw that video and I can't even, that's not cool because it's not a tragedy against Black people. These are assaults against humanity. This has nothing to do with color. This is about like the breakdown of humanity right now. So is that, I mean, I think that, well, you guys, Mike Gustavus' education put me in those two extremes. I mean, between seeing AIDS, not that Gustavus, it said in the description somewhere that you would see a person decapitated, but I mean, there are possibilities. But Gustavus did send me to Kenya.
You study abroad. Yep.
You know what I mean? So.
I want to come back around to that question and ask it back to you, I guess. So for you, there's a really important difference between me seeking out that video and watching it, and you'd say, yeah, you need to do that, Lisa, as opposed to me feeling the need as a white person to repost yet another video of a Black person being, harmed by the police so that other Black people are going to, randomly come across that and be re-traumatized by that. I mean, like, because a lot of folks are really saying, stop with the reposting. We don't need to be doing that. And I'm just curious what you think about that.
Well, you know what? When you said that, as both of us as dog lovers, it's kind of like I hate when people post dog brutality videos or they find a dog brutality video. Like, I know it exists. I don't need to see it. I mean, it's so on some level a person can say, it's too extreme. We know that it exists. Do I need to see it to want to know that it's wrong and to want to change it? Not necessarily. You know what I mean? Because we know that dog cruelty is wrong. I don't need to go see a dog fight or chickens fighting to know that that's wrong. Does it do something to you when you actually see it firsthand? Does it do something to you when you actually are living it and you're in it? You know what I mean? Like, I saw a judge. I'm standing there. this is someone respected in the neighborhood. I'm watching him talk to this kid. Granted, they both were like being confrontational, but the kid is standing here, he's standing here, and the judge goes to assault this kid, to hit this kid. He's like 18, 19 years old. So, I mean, was it a gun? No. Was it a knife? No. But still, am I being too sensitive to say that? I'm not trying to see someone get punched or beat up. Period. You know, is it a reality of being in Chicago that there's a chance you can see an act of violence? Yes. I just think that on some level, you know, if you don't prepare for it, then it catches you off guard because you don't think that it's a reality that we live in. I mean, I think that America had this whole time period where it was like, yes, there's a good chance you could see some violence. And then we went through this time period where we got control over it, where, yeah, violent things happen, but they weren't on a regular. I feel like we're back in this spot where we're going to see a lot of, I mean, it's a real thing. I mean, I'm in Chicago and they're preparing for a huge riot to happen today at 5. That's what they've been saying, you know. Yeah. So, I mean, if we're living that reality right now, why not just, I guess I'm saying, like, it's kind of like, you know, either you're pregnant or you're not. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, either we're in it.
Face.
Yeah. You know,
so put it in people's faces.
That's what I'm asking you. You think, I mean, would you write? I guess what I'm throwing it back on you, because you're in charge of brains that are going to go out there, the future class of 2024. I mean, this, and I feel like this class of 2020 is so important because, I mean, this is my quick, I want to throw this question at you, but this is where I'm saying, what you're preparing kids for, my son being one of them. No, let's just say this. I'm going to give you the scenario. Trump wins 2020, can't win anymore because he only gets 2 terms. 2024 is up for grabs.
Unless he manages to change the Constitution. I mean, he wants to do that, you know.
Right, unless he manages to change the Constitution. Let's just say he fails in that, though. Let's say he succeeds with winning. He fails in that. He can't do term 3. He does his 2 terms. 2024 is up the grass for anybody because now it's back flat. There's no more incumbent, right? It's equal grounds, right? Whoever wins truly had to duke it out and win. You know, it's a hard reset, right? The young adults that you're educating now, and this is a loaded question, but can the curriculum, can we just go whole hog and, like, let's not even just say George Floyd and racism and the brutality there. I mean, a thing that I can't really handle Holocaust stuff, and that's a real thing. You mean like Holocaust videos, documentaries? I don't want to see it. I don't want to talk about it. I know it happened. You know what I mean? So I get how people like my aunt, she is not trying to hear any slavery stuff. So I totally understand that. Some people just don't want to stomach it at all. But is that I mean, but can you, as an educator of higher institutions, once they made it to you, I mean, is it really can we really shield them from having that hardcore?
Absolutely. No, you're asking a great question, right? And I mean, it always kills me when people will say things like, well, we can't introduce topic X to 5-year-old children when the topic is something that elsewhere 5-year-old children are living on a daily basis, right? I mean, whether you're talking about, you know, Syrian children, whether you're talking about children on the border in camps sleeping on cement on the floor, whether you're talking about children who are sold into prostitution, whether you're talking about children on the west side of Chicago who just start seeing everyday violence. The fact is that from a very young age, human beings are exposed to atrocities. And so again, it comes back to a kind of privilege. I know I struggle a lot around this. Like, there are periods of time when maybe I've had something sad happen in my own life and I'm like, that's it, I can't read any sad books right now. And you think, seriously, what an incredible luxury that I don't even want to expose myself to sadness in my books, right? So I think, I really do think we have an obligation to say, you know what? Yeah, we can't, we don't get to do that, right? Like, we need We need to be in there. Now, that doesn't mean that every single day we have to simply wallow in it because, right, I mean, depression is a real thing, and ineffectiveness, or like, depleting yourself to the point where you can't do anything. Who was it that said, if I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your revolution, right? Like, there needs to be genuine joy and so on, but why do we can't, yeah, right. I need to watch the George Floyd video, and my students and I need to confront the brutality of, the extermination of indigenous people, and the reality of the ways in which slavery is still shaping us.
Well,
go ahead. Sorry, you're running the show. Go ahead. No, you're running the show.
I gotta interrupt you there. So, because are you at a disadvantage because you're about to have all these these 19, 20-year-olds, you're about to have like 500-600 of them all there from all around the world on Monday, right? So, I mean, don't you kind of feel like if you're at a disadvantage of one that's been like protesting all summer? They've been they're coming from these different points. I'm just wondering, like, can you really not be in it and be educated on like what they've been exposed to now?
Right. So what you're asking me is, how do I make sure that I stay connected to students who have been living a reality that I haven't been living? Is that what you're asking?
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know me as an educator enough to know that my job always, I think, is to make sure that whoever is in my room is also an educator, right? Like, so all of those students who have life experiences and bodies of knowledge and, beliefs that are unfamiliar to me, or that I haven't had a chance to live, right? Like, if those aren't in the room, if we don't get to learn from those, well, then I have really screwed up as an educator, right? Because you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm so aware of that oftentimes when I'm teaching like a racism and sexism class. And a lot of times at Gustavus, that might mean that I have, 20 students who are Euro-American and 5 students of color. And a lot of times those 5 students of color are like, like as I'm trying to explain structural racism, maybe it would be less true now. I don't think so, right? And white students are really kind of like, how does that work? Like, how is the prison system racist? Like they're really on the fundamental level trying to get their minds around it. Whereas the students of color are like, yeah, we kind of have been learning this since we were 5 or 3 or whatever it is. So how do I, as an educator, constantly make it possible for everybody in that room to be a teacher and a learner in ways so that they variously feel like, yeah, people have something to learn from me, and whoa, I really need to learn from them. This semester I'm teaching an environmental philosophy class, and we're using the language of the class as an ecosystem. And I kind of like that idea, right? Because, there are the detritivores that eat, that take care of the dead birds, and like they eat them up. And those are the microbes, that make sure that we don't have just stacks and stacks of dead stuff everywhere. And then there are the carnivores, the ones who like run really fast and leap. And then there are the ones that can photosynthesize, right? And so if you think about a classroom as being that, then wow, we sure need those students who have been in Minneapolis all semester, whether they're doing direct service to neighborhoods that didn't have a grocery store anymore, or whether they be on the, out protesting at midnight and 1 a.m., getting tear gassed or whatever. Boy, yeah, I better be finding out how those people are, and I better be doing it fast so that they can be saying, okay, let me test out these theories that you're spouting. Because I've got a laboratory, and it's called the street I was living on this summer, and I want to think about the degree to which that theory helps me at all, and to the degree that it doesn't, then we need to make a new theory. I don't know, long-winded answer.
Wow. Let's switch over, because the other part of what I wanted to ask you before I gotta let you go is just education in 2020 and beyond. I mean, because COVID's a real thing. All the stats are showing. University of North Carolina, mega school, land of Michael Jordan, shut down, said we're all virtual. Tons of schools are like So you mean you have these schools that are like, and this is kind of I know you're not into politics, but I'm throwing you on the spot here. So you got like tons of schools that are like, we're not even messing with it, virtual only, and then you have.
Hey, could I interrupt to say before we go there, would it be okay to talk a little bit more about the white kid with the AR-15? Would you mind if we did that? Would you rather not?
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
Because
sure.
I've been thinking about that kid a lot, and I've been thinking about him in part because this summer I was spending a lot of time with a young man who's the son of very dear friends. I've known this kid since he was born, literally. And, kid who came up in this progressive family with a lot of opportunities and educational privilege. And this kid is now a young man, just finishing up his education, has a great job ahead of him and so on. And he wants an AR-15. And he's pretty sure that he needs to have one to protect others. And he has become, his politics are very much on the libertarian end of things. And so, as an educator and as a person who likes to believe that I'm, connecting sometimes with some young people, I spent the summer having conversations with him and trying to engage in that thing I was talking about earlier, where you talk about, I'm going to listen to you really hard and I'm going to try to ask you good questions, even though right now what I think you're saying is real craziness, right? And so, for me, that's one of the things that I'm thinking about a lot right now, and I wonder if you have any thoughts about, because I'm seeing and hearing from others, parents of white young men on a certain demographic spectrum who maybe are really computer guys or engineer guys, and they're spending all their nights, going into the internet, into those places I don't even know how to get to, and they're and this young man in particular, he's reading all the philosophy, right? He's got this economist that he thinks is the most important thinker and so on. And I'm really wondering, how do we as educators, how do we as a community stay connected with these young men as they go farther and farther in a direction? This young man says, in order to be an adult, I need to own a gun.
Wow. You know what you made me think about too, which actually I'm glad you paused me, because that ties into my question of education 2020 and beyond, because a 17-year-old with an AR-15 with a military assault weapon. Number one, that's just problematic. Then number two, and I'm not like making excuses for them by any means at all, but the three, I don't even like to call them protests, but the three walks that I was involved in, being 46 and seeing these 18-year-olds, and I'm not trying to lump them all in one group, but they're very intense. They're in a different spot. And I think that the world wants to agree with that. They have a lot of energy. They're very committed to just atrocities against whatever, whether it's sexual orientation, race, religion. They're just like anti. If you do something wrong to someone, we're going nuts. And you have this kid that's on the opposite side, of his beliefs. Like, I'm going to jump in my car and protect the other towns, because a thing that was, videos that were flying around the incident that happened to Mr. Blake on Sunday, that there was videos of white males with their guns in Kenosha saying, well, the police said we're going to push them all in your area. And you guys, now was it true or not, but there are white American men that were on video on Facebook saying this, and here's this kid feeling like, hey, I'm going to go join them, protect the land. And that happened here in Chicago after George Floyd, where whole areas of Chicago said, hey, if you come over here, we're going to shoot you. So that's anarchy. I don't care if you want to, whatever you want to call it, when the citizens have taken up arms and are defined, you know, and that's, I think, the thing that we have to be really realistic about, that the kids like right now, and they're not kids, but I mean, anyone under 23 years old, I mean, that the possibility for them to say, hey, you know what, here I am, you know, I'm going to take arms, and which makes me also too concerned, which I'm glad you asked that question, because like with college campuses right now, because we know in normal settings, college campuses are intense. In normal settings, kids are mean to each other. They say mean things on all love. I mean, just when I was an RA, you know, every year, and it makes me so sad. But I mean, I was having, not every year, but less than that. I mean, I was either dealing with attempt suicide, drug overdose, alcohol poisoning, or attempted rape. And this is quote unquote the good school. I mean, this is quote unquote the expensive school, you know. And I love my school, but I saw some real. I mean, so kids in a normal world, but are we really? How are we really addressing and prepared for? I'm throwing it back on you. Like, I mean, I mean, I'm a parent, so I mean, I'm feuding with my own son, right? You know, I got my own stuff going on right now. I mean, so for you to be part of a team that's in charge of like a lot of them, like how do you even get your head ready for that right now?
It's a great question. And I mean, I think one of the things that we educators who normally teach in person are really struggling with is how can we be effective when we don't, I mean, Gustavus is starting online, and so we're not going to meet, first year students will meet one of their classes in person, but the rest of us are just starting online. Will that be an opportunity to get more connected with students? You know, like last spring, it was interesting to me that sometimes I made better connections with students because they found more comfort in that computer screen, right? Like I couldn't invade their space literally because there was a computer between me and them. And so they sort of felt like they could open up to me. You know, if we have students who are spending all of their, you know, 10 and 11 hours a day on the internet, researching their own particular brand of politics and connecting up with, you know, really, you know, often real extremist ideologies. You know, maybe the computer, maybe this little online experiment will teach us that there are ways we can be more effective in connecting with them. I mean, I was talking to another former Gustavus student and said, you know, I'd love to, it was somebody with whom I managed to make a connection. And I said, you know, I would love to believe that every student at every school, at every college, every high school, whatever, had some kind of a connection with a teacher in which that teacher saw them for the person that maybe they don't even know that they can be yet. Maybe they don't even know they want to be yet. But that relationship would be such that they would be able to keep listening to them and keep talking to them at the very moments when that student is most likely to be going off the rails or most likely to be going into a dark place where, you know, I mean, I genuinely, I share a real concern about my young friend. Like, I don't know what choices he will make about a gun and its use. How can I make sure that there are folks who continue to listen to him so that he will make the right choices and he won't be that young man in Kenosha?
And you know what? You made me just think about. I'm so glad you paused me on that and said, "Look, can we talk about the kid in Kenosha?" Because we think about my question I asked you earlier. I'm going to answer my own question. Like, yes, we have to show them the Floyd video, the Holocaust video, the AIDS video, and that the education of that has to be intense in their face at an earlier age because they're making the decisions anyway. Because now you have kids. That's a kid. He's not even legal. 17 years old with an automatic. I mean, that's just a vicious weapon. I mean, the amount of training that you have to have that kind of weapon that can push out, you know, rounds that just can cause an immense destruction of the human body. You know, you can immediately destroy 40 human bodies like in minutes, like done. And here's this kid with one nonchalantly walking down the street like he's playing a video game, you know. And I think that if we don't, I know if we don't educate people on why not to exert that power and to use that power because they have that power, you know what I mean? And that's the thing too. I know we say like, well, back in our days, we used to just fight, which we did. I mean, it was fist fights. Maybe there was a bat, maybe there was a knife, but like that was the next level for gun violence. And now gun violence it's not a big deal. And the thing I just feel like America as a whole, and that's because I was blessed to travel, that gun violence is real in so many other countries every day. I mean, where tribes are, you know, feuding against each other, whether it's police against different militias, whether it's different, you know, counter groups, you know, whatever, you know, that happens every day. In America, we just not seen it. But was this, you know, the kid in Kenosha, is this like a prelude to like how things can be? Because I said this before that happened. I said it's not that bad yet because no one has showed up to a protest with any guns, right? And then that happened. So that's the thing that everyone's afraid of tonight. And like that even sucks that that's even a real thing. Like tonight's the night where there might be gunfires and there might be a complete civil war tonight. I mean, like the fact that that's even a real thing. You mean of like definitely don't be out downtown Chicago tonight. Definitely board your windows tonight if you're downtown Chicago. Definitely tonight in Kenosha. I mean, Kenosha is like people are fleeing their city like it's a hurricane city. You mean like it's a you know, a tornado city. You know what I mean? So I think that, you know, we, not just even the onus on you, but we as, you know, citizens of the world and as an educator, I mean, that's what you do for a living. Like I always said, I used to joke, I can tell you what to do to train a dog. I'm not interested in understanding the technologies of like knowing that this 5-year-old is not in the right place with reading or English. You know, I think that you as the educator, I mean, that you all have to have like a different platform as far as this new, I think it's a real thing. Like, I don't know, it's not, I'm going to say not a thing. I know it's a real thing. This conceptual pandemic called racism, which America, I mean, we just are so, I feel like we're babies in regard to really wanting to admit to it, which, and you know, I'm going to say a third thing too, like the AIDS, that learning to save us, the decapitation of Nicholas Davis, and then in your class, I mean, I'd never read slave journals before. I mean, those things were freaking brutal. I mean, and things like things that I would have never known, which definitely shaped me to say, okay, I can get why. I understand why white American feels this way towards a black American. I mean, because like, just think about, you know, I always love busting people's head with the term motherfucker. I mean, the term motherfucker is a slave term, you know, where black boys, they would put bags in their head and they were forced to have sex with their mothers. And like, so it was like, oh, go bring me some motherfuckers. You mean, it was this concept of line breeding, like the same way they do with dogs or the same way they do with cattle. You mean, or that there were buck breaking farms where black men were systematically raped, and it was on the East Coast. And then you send your buck there and he'd be broken, then you send them back to the farm to have like this zombie of a person that you can control. I mean, these are brutalities of slavery that are real, that traces of that, you know, have carried over. You know, just the concept of police overall was police them. I mean, that's a byproduct of slavery. You know, they originally were private institutions that just were just like, hey,
exactly. Just
keep them in place.
And then throw in this concept of epigenetics, which people are thinking about in the biology sphere now, where it turns out that what happens to us, we genetically pass on to our, you know, children and grandchildren. So like one of the famous examples is in Norway, you know, if your great-great-grandparents went through a famine, you're going to hang on to calories in ways that mean that you're going to probably gain weight because your great-grandparents had to change their lives. Well, think about the epigenetics. I mean, I don't know anything about this biologically, and I'm probably talking out my hat, but this notion of the brutality you experience gets passed on. Well,
absolutely.
The brutality of generations of slavery gets passed on literally biologically, I have to believe, to African Americans. When we're talking about education and talking about what we can make happen, I mean, I keep coming back to what can we do to make sure that the things get said in the room so that we talk about them and listen about them. Years ago, I wrote this paper called Radical Listening, in which I talked about, as an educator, cultivating the capacity to listen at that point. And it comes back to watching hard things, right? Listen at the point when I want nothing more than to turn away or to stop listening or to say shut up or to change the channel. I don't think you can do that for long, long, long periods of time, but I think as an educator, I've got to create the conditions in which what I'm listening to on a regular basis is hard for me to hear, because I need to hear those things from students so that I can put the question back to them to say, okay, let's talk about why you think owning an AR-15 is one of the most important ways to mark your adulthood, for instance. And I don't know, you know, right, you know, Toriano, that I'm in the land of polite Midwestern, mostly white people who would rather die than tell you that you have spinach on your front tooth, right, as you're about to go on national television. So how do we get people to say stuff really in the room?
But you just, I love a key phrase you just said, and that could be a class by itself, listening to hard things. I mean, there's just certain things. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. Another Minnesota example, my great friend Wes Shook, who was a Gustie. Did you know Wes Shook?
I knew who he was.
Okay. He's no longer with us, but just he brought me to Mankato, Minnesota to do a seminar for one of his friends that worked with homeless youth. And I was like, they wanted me to come there, and I was like, all right, cool, it costs this much. And I was like, are you really homeless, or are you just like, you know, a white kid that's mad at your parents? And like they're telling their stories, and I'm like, no, these kids were homeless. Like, my dad assaulted me. My family does meth and sells meth. My father doesn't accept me for being trans. Like, it was this whole group of kids, and I call them kids, but young adults, that I had no idea that that was even a thing. That at night they ran looking for shelter. During the day they went to school, and no one knew that they had these double lives going on. And then this one kid
in Mankato.
Like, in Mankato. But then I was like, okay, I get it. You're homeless there, but why do you want dogs? Like, doesn't that make your world that much more stressful? And then they said, well, we tie them to our legs at night, and then if they start barking or moving, we start running because they protect us from the body snatchers. I was like, what's a body snatcher? I like clutching my pearls. I was like, what's a body snatcher? And they're like the ones that look for kids at night. And I was like, oh shit. Like, these kids spend their whole day going to school during the day and at night running from sex slavery in Mankato, Minnesota. And I'm sitting there, I'm just like, I almost puked. I'm like, I didn't know that was even a thing. You know what I mean? Like, and I sitting there listening to their story. After a while, I was like, I was in tears at one point. This one kid, he's just breaking the whole thing down for me. And I'm just like, holy shit! Like, I heard of sex slavery. I knew that sex slavery exists. I knew these things are bad, but I'd never talked to someone that actually their reality. That's the thing they're doing. So when you just said listening to hard things, I mean. Can we have? I mean, I'm asking the questions I don't know. Are there like how like there's certain classes like sound physics? I thought it was about music, and it wasn't. It kicked my butt. I didn't pass. It was a hard class. I mean, can we have curriculums that are super duper hard, and you know when you go into it, it conceptually it's rated R. You mean, and you're gonna hear some kid, talk about, yes, sex slavery is a real thing. Yes, racism is a real thing. Sexual assault's a real thing. The Holocaust victims are a real thing. Like, can that be a curriculum, or is through college? Is that not the responsibility of a school to bring that hard to listen to things to someone's face?
Oh, I think it's absolutely our responsibility. If we, the 5 core values of Gustavus, one of them is justice. And how can we bring about justice in the world unless we look hard in the face at injustice? And that means looking hard at these things. I mean, for me, it always comes back to that question of, how effective are scared straight programs, or how effective is it if I get hit over the head, or do I need to, and so I keep coming back to, when am I able to keep listening, and when are the people in this room when are they going to shut down? And so I think that's always the question. And sometimes less is more, but also I know that we can be afraid, right? We live in a time in which professors are genuinely concerned about sort of what we do in the classroom being targeted with being inappropriately political, or with being, too far on the left or whatever. I mean, faculty experience, faculty find themselves unemployed for reasons that are, disturbing.
Right.
There was a case a couple of years ago. It's a complicated case, admittedly, but a case of an African-American professor at Wheaton College in Illinois. Wheaton College is a religiously conservative institution. And she did a few things, one of which was she chose, in solidarity with people in Syria, to wear the hijab. And she also made a comment in her class that we all worship the same God. She and the school came to supposedly an amicable parting of ways, but she found herself unemployed by Wheaton College because of the comments that she made about Islam in a religiously conservative school. So, and that's one example. There are lots and lots of those sorts of examples. So all I'm not saying, oh, poor me, right? I'm a tenured professor at a religiously progressive institution. I have way more rope than I use in a given semester, Toriano. That's the God's honest truth, right? Like I could be pushing myself and my students harder. And I sort of feel like you wanted this podcast today because you wanted to make sure that I did. I feel like you are giving me my marching orders today, and I'm glad, right? Like I'm being invited to think really hard about how the hell I'm going to be using this semester. I feel like I've been thinking that, but really what it comes down to is I've been thinking a lot about whether I was going to use Zoom or Google Meet, right? We're all involved in all this technology, but what we ought to be saying first and foremost is, how do we make sure that our students, in whatever the subject matter is, talk about a global pandemic and race relations that are deteriorating rapidly because of the persistence of white supremacy.
And so what you asked earlier.
Plus climate change.
Plus climate change. But what you asked earlier, though, I mean, the kid with the AR-17. I mean, there's kids out there with these AR-17s, and then I think being sarcastic but real and being honest and not being sarcastic is like, if it can happen in Kenosha, I mean, you don't think of buildings burning down
right by
in
Carthage
Kenosha.
College, right? One of my another young friend of mine just graduated from Carthage College, and he lived in the neighborhood where this is going down, right? So it could have been St. Peter, Minnesota, right? With
that's what I'm saying.
College.
Right. I mean, if it happened in Kenosha, I mean, why not St. Peter? I mean, why not? I mean, Mankato's bigger than Kenosha. I mean, like, there's Kenosha. You think normally like good things about Kenosha. You think like, oh,
Kimberly Clark,
Kenosha.
paper towel.
Right. Kenosha, like, but Kenosha's on fire right now. People are like afraid to be in Kenosha. People don't want to drive through. So, I mean, I think it's I thank you for saying that. Like, you get your marching orders. I mean, really, I was just, what went through my mind was like, and I think we need more people of that education, of that higher education platform to add some logic and to balance out what people are saying. You know what I mean? On all levels. You know what I mean? Whether it's, do I wear a mask and I don't wear a mask? Like, is it science, or it's as I've heard people say, pandemic. You know what I mean? Is it race? Like someone, when people are getting flack because people out there are already supporting the kid. Like the kid from Kenosha is like, well, was it really bad? Like, for some people they legitimately feel that way. Some people are like, dude, that's freaking crazy. Like, why does he even have a weapon at all? Why is he out playing basketball? Or why is he like in school? Like, why is that even, like, who are you as a parent to know that your son even has this, that his life is like wrecked? And I feel that no, I mean, I thank you today for taking time.
Of course, always got time for you, Toriano.
For not because you have tomorrow's the big day, right? All the kids are.
They're showing up. I think first years are. You know what? I'm not, since none of us is allowed to help. I don't even know if it's today or tomorrow, to be honest. But I think it's today. Yeah.
Isn't that a crazy that's a real thing too now? Just the whole distancing and just
Right. Yep. And it's so hard. I mean, I love the start of school so much. It's really painful. But honestly, it also brings home the fact that if we have business as usual in colleges and universities this fall, that makes no sense, right? This is not usual in any sense of the word.
Right.
It can't be usual. So, I mean, I really hope that we all work hard to be listening to who's in our room with us and helping them in whatever ways we can, to deepen and strengthen and challenge the ideas they come into the room with. And give them the kind of opportunities they need to make them better ideas, right? Like, I don't believe Plato was right. Like, I don't think that there are absolute truths, but I sure do think that there are better ideas and worse ideas, and that we can find them.
So
let's
end the show on this. Let's put this out there, since this is being documented. So we met in 1992, right?
Wow.
It's 2020 now. What is that math?
28 years.
I didn't master it.
28 years. 28 years.
Okay. So
28.
When we have this conversation 28 years from now, where's America at?
I'm going to hope that the seeds of social change that I do see in the responses to George Floyd's murder are that they didn't all fall on shallow soil and wither in the sun. That white people say, this is our struggle, and it is for the long haul. And we are having a conversation, and we're saying, God, can you believe how much change has happened? We didn't think that it would be the case that you would ever be able to drive from Chicago to Minneapolis without worrying about where you stopped for gas. And now you're like, I had 2 taillights out and I didn't even realize it until some friendly cop stopped me to say, hey, you want to fix those. I'd love to believe that. I mean, I feel a little bit like W.E.B. Du Bois. I think we read his essays on education in a class that you had.
Yeah.
And, in the early years he was just like glowing about the end of segregation and like, wow, it's going to be the case that blah, blah, blah. And then by the time he's 90, he's like, yeah, I guess I was kind of wrong about that. But maybe we can department You know, he decamped for Ghana, right? Where he was like, yeah, it's a little more pleasant here. But maybe we have an obligation to hope and to believe. You know, what is it? The audacity of hope, right? That, you know, that we ought to be audacious enough to think, hell yeah, Toriano, in let's not even make it 28, let's make it 20 years, 15 years. Let's think that when you drive up for Baraka's graduation in 4 years, you're going to be like, yeah, you know what? I can see real differences from that weekend that he moved in, when I was too afraid to drive up and be with him because I thought maybe my windows would be smashed out and I'd get some horrible thing happening to me in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And now look at what's going on. Look at the genuine progressive movements for anti-racism that have sprung up in places like Kenosha, and people who said, shoot, I'd never imagine myself involved in that. I mean, I hear former gang members who have really made a decision to change their lives talk about their work, you know, with folks who are in gangs or are susceptible to gangs, and the kind of transformative that the ways that they talk about things like race and about violence and so on, like, right, like, this is what I used to think and this is what I think now. Or people who leave, you know, all kinds of extremist religious movements and so on, and they now are like, wow. So that kind of enormous transformation is possible on the individual level. So what if a bunch of that happened collectively? In 4 years, it could be a lot safer to drive here if we really did stuff. She says to herself sternly.
Yeah. Amen. I love it. I love that.
So I need to.
I love you. I love you.
I love you too, Toriano. And I want you to send me a list of things that you need me to do. I want to be held accountable, and it's not your job alone. It's not your job alone, and I'm asking. I'm not demanding. I'm asking you if you would do me that kindness.
Yes.
To make some demands.
Yes. And I appreciate that from my heart, because it's, who would ever thought that one day the student would be having a conversation with the professor like this. And so I gladly, and I do, and I appreciate you so much for our second show. I thank all our listeners. I hope that we brightened someone's day, and not all doom and gloom, but we educated someone on a Saturday morning. Everyone that was out there listening, and I want to say peace and love to everyone in Minnesota. You know, that Minnesota's a fabulous. I mean, I stayed there for 10 years. I mean, that the things that have happened are not a reflection of the majority, or else I would have never stayed it. And that's across the world, that there's people that are that this guy said, Chris Roy, on the very first podcast, on August 1st podcast, he said something so interesting. He said, I don't think that people are good people. He said, I don't think people are inherently good people. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm like, no, people aren't inherently good. He said, you have to work to be good. And I was like, I like that. That's because then it's like, people do shitty stuff.
Right. And you can also learn to be kind. I mean, that it's a practice, and you can do exercises that make you more that way. Just like you can learn how to dribble and shoot. Right.
We have to work for that. So on that note, let's work to be kind today. Let's touch base. Go Gusties. You know, have a fabulous first. I mean, I'm gonna send you a list. And we're going to check in definitely before 4 years, but
absolutely let me know when you're going to be able to come up here, because I'll wanna take you out for a socially distanced cup of coffee or something.
We shall soon.
All right.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Dr. Lisa Heldke from Gustavus Adolphus College. I'm Toriano Sanzoni, the Wolfkeeper. Thank you for tuning in to our show. And remember, as always, there's one alpha dog, and that's you. And be true and go love somebody hard. Thank you so much.